Hi, I'm Phil. Welcome to my channel where I like to talk about all the geeky pop culture that I enjoy. I very much enjoy Doctor Who. In fact, probably about 50% of my channel is dedicated to Doctor Who. So if you're a Doctor Who fan, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because there is plenty of Doctor Who content on this channel from me. Like this video, which is a book collection video. I asked on my Twitter if people would be interested in seeing this, and the response was positive. People seemed to be interested, so I'm going to do it because I have a very short window when this is practically possible for me to do. You see, I happen to own a lot of Doctor Who books. I'm talking hundreds of Doctor Who books, but I don't really have the space to put them out on shelves. I've got a few out on shelves. I've got 3 bookshelves at various places in my houses with Doctor Who books on, but the majority of them are up the loft. And therefore, in order to get them all out and show you them, takes time. I've taken the day off work to do this, and also it takes space. And it just so happens that we're renovating our spare room for my daughter to move into. We've had the walls plastered, there's barely any furniture in there, there's lots of floor space at the moment for this very brief period of a few weeks. So if I was ever going to do this video, it's now. So yeah, I need to go and lug all these boxes down from the loft. Look, I hope you appreciate this. You know, show your appreciation by clicking that like button. A lot of heavy lifting involved here, okay? So my loft's a tip. It's absolutely got far too much stuff in it. One day I'll sort it out. Anyway, this is the corner where I keep all the books that don't fit on bookshelves. Not just Doctor Who ones, we got so many books that we're never going to have space to display. We really need to get rid of some. But not the Doctor Who ones. Not getting rid of those. We also recently had rats in this loft. Not pleasant. We hired an exterminator, set some traps, laid some poison, and I came up here to check it one day, and there was a rat in the trap, neck snapped, wasn't pretty. Anyway, Doctor Who books are somewhere in here. I've now got to get them out. In the most awkward place, they're right in the corner. This is in the way. Ah, holy crap, that's not good. Should we come back to these after we've looked at the shelves? Let's start with the bookshelf in my living room, of which I've got a little portion of Doctor Who books on there. Mostly it's not Doctor Who, but this is where I like to keep my reference type books. So you've got, and also a few comics as well actually. So what have we got here? We've got Dalek, lovely picture book, which is a beautiful, it's got some lovely illustrations in there, and a lot just history of the Daleks. I only read like a few chapters of that. The Whoniverse, which again, some absolutely beautiful illustrations and things in there. Amazing book. Doctor Who The Vault, which is sort of about all the merchandise that got released around different eras, and some of the production notes and things like that. It's got a lot of sort of behind the scenes information in there. Very good book. I've got a few comics. So I've got the 9th Doctor Who magazine collected comics. I've got Panini comics from Doctor Who magazine again. Hunters of the Burning Stone with the 11th Doctor and Ian and Barbara. Specifically why I picked that one up. From the Titan range, I've got volume 1 and 3 of the 9th Doctor and volume 2 and 3 of the current Doctor. I don't have volume 1 of the current Doctor because I had them all in individual issues. I will probably get it eventually. Got the brilliant book 2012, Aliens and Enemies, the only one of those sort of style books I've got. Then I've got volumes 1 and 2, the 4th edition of A History. If you don't know what A History is, it's if you love knowing where all the stories fit in the timeline of the Doctor Who universe, this is the book you need to get, or the series of books you need to get. I've been collecting these since they started in around about 2005, 2006. Or was it? It was about 2006-ish. They released the first one, the first edition, and it was just a single volume, about that thick. And then they released a second edition, which I bought a few years later, which got a bit thicker. Then they released a third edition, which I didn't get, which was quite chunky, and then for the fourth edition they've had to split it up into 3 really chunky sized volumes. This is the entire history of the Doctor Who universe up to the point these were released. One sort of volume is the past, volume 2 is sort of present day. It covers everything from like the 1960s onwards, basically from the start of the show to sort of present day, and then volume 3, which I haven't got yet, is the far future. Definitely getting it though. Brilliant books. Take a while to wade through though. Russell T Davies, The Writer's Tale there. Got The Doctor, His Lives and Times. Doctor Who, The Inside Story by Gary Russell. That's my collection of reference-y type books and comics in my living room. So then I have a small bookshelf on my landing with an eclectic mix of Who books on it. I have 365 Days of Memorable Moments and Impossible Things, which is a book which has an entry for each day of the year with something Who related to talk about on it. Whoology, a book of interesting facts and trivia. Here's a random page I turn to with information on all of the Doctor's encounters with werewolves, Frankenstein and swamp monsters. Now We Are 600, James Goss's delightful book of Doctor Who poetry, also with some very funny illustrations by Russell T Davies. The Target-style novelisations of Day of the Doctor, which I still haven't got around to reading yet. Diamond Dogs, one of the 12 Doctor novels. I've got a review of this up on my channel, so if you fancy checking that out, I will leave the link in a card or something, or down below, somewhere like that. The rest of my 12 Doctor novels, by the way, are in those boxes you saw earlier. And in fact, I'll probably include this one again later, because the rest of the 12 Doctor books are there. So you might see this one twice. I then have the 3 13th Doctor new series adventure books, Combat Magics, Molten Heart, and The Good Doctor. None of which I've got around to reading yet. I've heard mixed things about them, so it'll be interesting to see if I agree with what I've heard. I might try and do some reviews once I've read them, but no promises. I've got the short story collections The Legends of River Song, which I have not read, and The Legends of Ashilda, which I have. The stories in that collection actually gave her a much better character arc than we really saw on the show, so that was a nice surprise. The Wheel of Ice I have read, but to be honest, I really couldn't tell you much about it now. And then I have the Mr. Doctor books, bought for me by my daughter for various Father's Days and birthdays since they started coming out, although I don't think I've got the whole set yet. These are, frankly, just very fun, especially if you used to like the actual Mr. Men books, as I did. Piled up on the end there, I have A Brief History of the Time Lords, the War Doctor novel The Engines of War, and several Big Finish short trips books. Cricket Men, the story by Douglas Adams and completed in novel form by James Goss. I haven't read this yet, but I have read the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books that Douglas cannibalised several of his ideas from this story for. On the shelf below, I have a complete set of reprints of novels released for the 50th anniversary, one for each Doctor. 10 Little Aliens, Dreams of Empire, Festival of Death, Fear of the Dark, Players, Remembrance of the Daleks, Earthworld, Only Human, Beautiful Chaos, and The Silent Stars Go By. Some of those will be coming up again later in their original release form as well. The final place outside the loft that I keep books is admittedly a bit of a strange one. It's in my wardrobe. There are shelves in there, so it's not completely insane, even if I do keep them next to the towels. There are a handful of Doctor Who books mixed in amongst others here, as well as a couple of Big Finish special release box sets, because they're frankly just too tall for my Big Finish shelves. On the book front, I have The Virgin Missing Adventures Who Killed Kennedy, which I had just finished reading when I recorded the video element for this. And yeah, I loved it. It's a very different type of Doctor Who book, taking an outside character and seeing the events of the Pertwee era through their eyes. I have the TARDIS Type 40 instruction manual, always handy if yours ever breaks down. The Face of the Enemy Past Doctor adventure novel, which is here because I do plan on reading it soon, and I've been planning on reading it soon ever since I recorded the video to this over a year ago. I'll get around to it. Next shelf, we have 4 Target novelizations, which along with The Day of the Doctor are the only Targets I own. Here are The Power of Kroll, which I got free actually at LFCC Comic Con, along with a mystery box. Then I have The Daleks Master Plan Part 1 and 2, and Doctor Who and the 10th Planet. Admittedly, I've not really been massively interested in collecting the novelizations, especially for stories that existed on home media that I could just watch. I'm coming around to them, but I think given the choice, I'd still take an original novel over a novelization. And finally, I have John and Carol Barrowman's Torchwood novel Exodus Code, which I have yet to read. Oh, and Behind the Sofa, a collection of celebrities recalling their memories of watching the show. Right, let's get to all that stuff that lives up the loft. Starting with the New Adventures. I have a bunch of New Adventures novels published by Virgin in the early 90s, including all 4 of the Time Worm run, but only one of the Cat's Cradle trilogy, which is Witchmark. Now, despite having owned most of the books I do from this range for almost 15 years, I haven't got around to reading a single one of them yet. It's my intention to read them once I finish making my way through the 8th Doctor Adventures, which I have been very slowly doing for the last 15 years. I've got the Higher Science, The Pit, Lucifer Rising there as well. Now, most of these I've owned for 15 years, and I actually bought from a bookshop in Dubai, of all places. I was in my second year of uni, and my as-she-was-then girlfriend had just finished her master's degree and gotten a 3-month job at a museum in the United Arab Emirates, so I, of course, did the very sensible thing and blew an entire semester's student loan on flights over to go visit her. It was worth it in the end, though, because obviously I found a load of these books. And, oh yeah, now she's my wife. Literally the majority of my suitcase on the way home, though, was filled with these. I think I may have even discarded a few clothes to make room. So we've got White Darkness, Blood Heat, which I'm looking forward to reading because I'm really interested to see what Earth was like during the Silurian times. That's something I really think they should do in an episode as well. The Dimension Riders, Conundrum, No Future, of which I seem to have 2 copies. You can see the difference in state between them. After I recorded this, I donated any duplicates I found to a local charity shop, so as much as you're tempted, there's no point in putting in the comments that you'd like them, I'm afraid. Tragedy Day, Legacy, and All-Consuming Fire, and it's worth saying that some of the artwork on this range is just absolutely fantastic. Very detailed, very striking. Like this one from Blood Harvest. I've then got Strange England, First Frontier, which is maybe one of the most famous covers from this range, Falls the Shadow, Parasite, Warlock, Toy Soldiers, Head Games, The Also People, and Shakedown. I then have Just War, which, while I have not read the book, I have listened to the Big Finish Benny audio adaptation, which was very good. Finally, I have War Child, Death and Diplomacy, and my only one with the latter style of cover, Bad Therapy. On to Missing Adventures and Past Doctor Adventures. I have one Missing Adventures book, Scale of Injustice. Much like the New Avengers books, it remains unread. I have a few more Past Doctor Adventures though. City at World's End, Salvation, Heart of TARDIS, Last of the Grenadine, Castrophia, Festival of Death, Asylum, Last Man Running, Divided Loyalties, Imperial Moon, The King of Terror, and one I've actually read, The Quantum Archangel. In fact, The Quantum Archangel may be the very first Doctor Who novel I ever read. It was either this or one of the 8th Doctor Adventures. I bought them around the same time in my first week at uni from Poundland, and before I got the internet in my student house a month or so later, I got through it really quickly. Not that I remember much about it now. Next is Players. This is one of the earlier ones in the range where the logo had the strange water ripple effect on it, which I'm not keen about, to be honest. I much preferred the blue logo they moved to later, like in this one, Grave Matter. Here's Palace of the Red Sun, Instruments of Darkness, Synthespians, and Unusual Business. This one not only has the inferior logo, but also the scourge of the very early PDA designs, the swirl. This sort of swirly thing seemed to be on all of the first batch of books in the PDA range, and I think some of the EDA range as well, the 8th Doctor Adventure range. And yeah, it's not great, is it? Next, I have Matrix, The Algebra of Ice, Prime Time, and Bullet Time. Oh, and talking of covers, I should say that the later Past Doctor Adventures, after the blue logo switch, and the 8th Doctor Adventures have my favourite style of cover designs of any Doctor Who books. Most don't even include the Doctor. They are more abstract, and I kind of like that. They really felt sleek, like pieces of art I'd put up on my wall. This is where Photoshop composite art came into its own for cover design, and I don't think this era has been beaten since. Heritage, another great abstract cover. Independence Day, and Loving the Alien. Oh, and these, I don't know why I didn't put these in with the rest in the correct place. I recorded this video element of this about a year before the voiceover, and my memory ain't that good. Regardless, we have The Time Travelers, another great cover, Salvation, Bunker Soldiers, Combat Rock, and Scream of the Shulker, which is the novelisation of the BBC I webcast from 2003 that saw Richard E. Grant voice an animated Ninth Doctor, before the TV Ninth Doctor ever was. I remember watching that, painfully downloading the episode on an old dial-up internet. I now own the DVD as well, so I should really probably get around to watching that in sort of much more fluid motion than I ever got on my 56k dial-up internet. Maybe one day I'll read the novelisation as well. The Infinity Doctors is one I might get around to sooner rather than later because it involves a seemingly unknown version of the Doctor, and it sounds really interesting. Then we've got the 8th Doctor Adventures. Wait, are you still watching? That is some dedication, friend, and I thank you. The good news is we're getting on to books I've actually read now. Not long after the 2 books I picked up in Poundland, I came across The 8 Doctors, and my trek through the EDA range began. I was hooked. I remember really liking the fact that the 8th Doctor was hopping around key moments in his own timeline, which, for a multi-Doctor story man like me, is basically catnip. I love a good multi-Doctor story. The shop also had Vampire Science, the next story along, so I got that one as well from the same shop. I think it was Oxfam Books. From then on, I was scouring eBay, charity shops, anywhere I could find that I might come across 8th Doctor adventure books, because I wanted to continue my reading experience in order. At the time of getting the Body Snatchers, I didn't really know anything about Zygons. I'd never seen any of the classic episodes starring them, but this was still a very interesting book. Genocide saw the return of classic companion Joe Grant, and it's always fun seeing what a classic companion is up to after they've left the Doctor. Then we have War of the Daleks. The 8th Doctor Dalek books don't have the best reputation. Honestly, I can't really remember if they're any good, but I do remember this being very lore heavy, including giving a convoluted explanation as to how Skaro survived the destruction at the end of the Remembrance of the Daleks. Alien Bodies is the book that kicked off the Faction Paradox arc, as well as the War in Heaven arc. Both of these arcs I still haven't finished. We've also got Cursal, Option Lock, Longest Day, and Legacy of the Daleks. This is the Dalek book that brought back Susan and caught us up with her life on Earth after the Dalek invasion. Dreamstone Moon, Seeing Eye, Placebo Effect, Vander Deacon's Children, have I pronounced that right? Vander Deacon's Children? And The Scarlet Empress, which is where we get to meet Iris Wildtime, who many years later would go on to be played on Big Finish Audios by Katie Manning. The Janus Connection, Bell Tempest, The Face Eater, The Taint, which introduced new companion Fritz Kriener. A fun companion in my opinion. Big Finish fans may recognise the name from a single audio story in the Company of Friends release. It's a real shame we didn't get to hear more from him, because I think he would have been great for more audios. We then have Demontage, Revolution Man, Unnatural History, and Autumn Mist. Now, Interference Book 1 and 2 were an ambitious story. Being over 2 books anyway was ambitious, but it was also a crossover with the 3rd Doctor. It had Sarah Jane Smith returning, was incredibly lore-heavy, and dealt heavily with the story arcs that had been established so far in the 8th Doctor range, including the mind-bending story of Faction Paradox, and the War in Heaven stuff. This is where things got serious. Shit went down. Then we have The Blue Angel, The Taking of Planet 5, and Frontier Worlds. This is unfortunately where my reading of the series ends. I stumbled and slowed massively in reading them about 10 years ago, and it's been a fair few years now, about 5 since I read Frontier Worlds. I will get back to it though, and finish reading them. I hereby declare it my mission for 2021 to read some, at least, of these series. So, the ones I own but haven't read yet are Parallel 59, The Shadows of Avalon, The Fall of Yucatan, that one I can't really pronounce, which I appear to have 2 copies of again. Then there's The Space Age, which is where my collection starts to have gaps. I don't have all of the EDAs after this point. But I do have the Banquo Legacy, the Ancestor Cell, which I'm really looking forward to because it's the next really arc-heavy book where, spoilers, Gallifrey gets destroyed and the Doctor ends up on Earth with no memory for a bunch of books, in which he lives through many eras, including the 1890s in the Burning, the First World War and Casualties of War, the 1930s in Wolfsbane, and then we get to the 1980s with Father Time, the only book in this part of the range I've actually read, as it was one of those two that I picked up from Poundland right at the beginning of my Doctor Who journey. I will tease you by telling you that in it, the Doctor has a daughter. Not Jenny, different daughter. This book and the story that was in it was the first book that really made me want to get into the 8th Doctor adventures. Then we have Escape Velocity, Fear Itself, which is technically not part of the EDA range, it's part of the Past Doctor range, but it is an 8th Doctor novel, which is why I put it in here, and reading up on the chronology, it seems the most logical placing. This came out after the 2005 revival had started, so the cover made a lot of people think that it might have the Slovene in, because, I mean, well, look at it. That shadow definitely looks like a Slovene head. I don't think they're in it though, but I haven't read it, so who knows? Continuing the 8th Doctor adventures that I haven't read, we have Earthworld, Vanishing Point, which I clearly got on a nice offer of £3 for £5 from, I don't know, somewhere like The Works. Eater of Wasps, The Year of the Intelligent Tiger, Slow Empire, The City of the Dead, Grim Reality, Mad Dogs and Englishmen, the 100th BBC published Doctor Who books, because obviously it doesn't count Target books and Virgin published books because they're other companies who just had a license, and that is certainly one striking cover, and as someone recently pointed out to me on Twitter, that dog has a weirdly human hand. Then we have Hope, Anacrophobia, and Trading Futures, looking very James Bond-esque, doing Spyfall before Spyfall. The Book of the Still and The Crooked World. This one has a brilliant cover. I've never read it all the way through, but a few years before I properly started reading Doctor Who books, I would see them in the library, and the cover of this one just made me pick it up and start reading it there in the library. I only got as far as the first chapter or two before, I don't know, I had to leave the library and I didn't bother to check the book out, so I'm looking forward to eventually getting back to this one. Next, we have History 101, The Infinity Race, The Domino Effect, Reckless Engineering, Timeless, Emotional Chemistry, Half-Life, The Sleep of Reason, and finally, The Gallifrey Chronicles, which I gather had the task of wrapping up all of the 8th Doctor story arcs, as the series had been cancelled at this point because it was 2005 and BBC Books were going to concentrate exclusively on new series content. I'm looking forward to getting to this eventually. It may take me a while. Now, talking of 2005, it ushered in not only a new era on TV, but a whole new era to Doctor Who books too, as we got brand new, original stories regularly released concurrently to an ongoing series for the first time, and in hardback. I have read all of the new series adventures apart from the 13th Doctor ones, as I was determined, especially in those early years, not to get behind on them like I had started out behind on the 8th Doctor range. It kicked off with 3 releases featuring the 9th Doctor and Rose, The Clockwise Man, Winner Takes All, and The Monsters Inside. I haven't read these books in over 15 years, so I honestly can't remember much about them, I'm afraid. There will be a few exceptions, for ones that have really stuck in my head though. One thing to note about this lot though, is that if I'm remembering correctly, the prison planet they visit in Monster Inside is referenced in Series 1 itself. To see some kind of tie-in, however small, with a TV show referencing an adventure that took place in the books, just really excited me at the time, and I really wish they'd done more of it. The next set of books were The Deviant Strain, The Stealers of Dreams, and Only Human, which introduced Captain Jack to the mix. I broadly remember Only Human being my favourite of the new Who books so far at that point. Then we get the 10th Doctor and Rose era with the Stone Rose, the Resurrection Casket and the Feast of the Damned. Then the Art of Destruction, the Price of Paradise, the Nightmare of Black Island. Martha's turn up next, and this is clearly where they stepped up how frequently they release them, because she gets the most books out of any companion pairing, with Martha in the Mirror, Sick Building, Forever Autumn, Peacemaker, Wet World, Wooden Hearts, Sting of the Zygons, which is the first time a classic series monster had returned in the main new series books, a good 6 or so years before they would appear in the TV series itself. Then The Last Dodo, The Many Hands, Snow Globe 7, and The Pirate Loop by Simon Guerrier, which is one of my favourite Who books from this whole era, partly because it has giant talking space pirate badgers in it, and it's brilliantly funny. This is also one of the few books from this time that I've read more recently, and if you want to hear my thoughts on it, go check out Matt Greenfield's Who Shelf podcast, episode 2, which I was the guest on to talk about this and one of my favourite non-Who books. Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, the extensive run of books featuring Martha. There's also Wishing Well and The Story of Martha, which was technically a later release, I think after the Donna books, but I like to put things in story continuity order, so here it goes. This details the year she spent travelling the world telling the story of the Doctor between The Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords in the series of short stories. This was a bit of a break from the format of the books so far, and a refreshing one, I thought. So that's a total of 13 books for Martha in this range, and she was only the companion for a year. Not that she doesn't deserve it. Donna, however, only gets Ghosts of India, which has a lovely cover, love the detailing around the top, Beautiful Chaos, Shining Darkness, and The Doctor Trap. Then we get to the solo Doctor stories set during the year of specials when he had no companion. These also featured returning enemies from the TV show, starting with the Slovene excursion, then Prisoner of the Daleks, marking the Doctor's nemesis's return to original novels for the first time since those 8th Doctor ones, although there had been a quick reads book featuring them as well, and the taking of Chelsea 426 with the return of the Sontarans. Autonomy has the Autons, then there's the Krilitane Storm, and Judgment of the Judoon. Check out my video on the history of the Judoon that mentions this book, if you're interested. The exception to the returning monsters rule in this run was kind of the eyeless, but it does tie into the Time War. One of the first bits of expanded media to really do that, so in a way, I suppose it kind of links back to the Daleks. Then we're into a whole new era and a whole new format of book. Still hardback, but slightly taller. I wasn't as keen on these larger covers when they first came out, but I did get used to them. With just the Doctor and Amy, we've got Apollo 23, The Forgotten Army, The Night of the Humans, before Rory then joins them for The Glamour Chase by Gary Russell. Gary and also writer Una McCormack would bring back the concept of the glamour for a trilogy of 12th Doctor books later on, and I loved this link between the continuity of the books. The King's Dragon by Una also tied into this concept too, I think. Then we have Nuclear Time, Hunter's Moon, and The Dead of Winter. The Way Through the Wood, Touched by an Angel, featuring the Weeping Angels, Paradox Lost, and Borrowed Time. I'm now noticing that this run had a very colourful, vibrant covers. Nice. That changed starting with the Eleven and Clara era of books, though, in which we got Shroud of Sorrow. I mean, I call it an era, but it's actually just one book. The other 2 books in this wave were releases were solo Doctor ones, with Plague of the Cybermen and the Dalek Generation. Dalek Generation is a fantastic Dalek story, which I guess makes sense as it's written by Nick Briggs. And who else alive knows the Daleks better than Nick Briggs? Then we're on to the 12th Doctor and back to some more interesting and dynamic cover designs. He gets a second adventure with the Paternoster Gang after his single one on TV, with Silhouette. Then there's Crawling Terror, The Blood Cell, and the Glamour Chronicles trilogy, which, as I said earlier, ties back into Gary Russell and Una McCormack's earlier 11th Doctor books, and forms a kind of loose trilogy themselves here surrounding the mystery of the glamour. I think this sort of thing was a very bold choice for the books. I really liked it, but as they haven't repeated it since, I'm guessing it might not have sold that well. So we've got Royal Blood, Deep Time, and the Big Bang Generation in this trilogy. And my favourite is definitely the Big Bang Generation, which also brings in Virgin New Adventures and Big Finish companion Bernice Summerfield. Now, at this point I knew of Bernice, but I had never read a book with her in or listened to an audio with her in, the latter of which I have now rectified. But even despite this, I found the crossing over of the 2 eras of expanded universe characters very exciting. It tickled the fan service bone in me. If you want to see my now over 3 years old review of this trilogy, I'll leave the link below. Then it's time for a single set of 12 and Bill books, kicking off with The Shining Man, which is an interesting story that takes on viral videos in fairy realms. There's a review of that on my channel. Plague City, which myself and my sister did a review on her now defunct BookTube channel, but I think the video is still there, so I'll leave a link to that one as well. And Diamond Dogs, which there is also a review up on my channel. And that I already mentioned. and that you've already seen. I don't know why I put this in twice, but it felt like it should go here as well. Outside of the main book ranges, I have a few other stories in various mediums, such as the quick reads. These were very short, cheap novellas written in a simple style to help those that find reading hard to get into it. And of course, some of us are just completists, so got them even though we're already avid readers. These books tend to utilise villains from the TV series for added appeal. I have, I think, the whole set consisting of I Am Dalek, Made of Steel, Revenge of the Jadoon, The Sontaran Games, Code of the Krillitines, Magic of the Angels, and The Silurian Gift. Then I have some of the larger hardback books, which were released separate to the regular new series range, like The Coming of the Terror Files, written by famous science fiction author Michael Moorcock. This is probably the weirdest Doctor Who book I've ever read, and I have to say it's my least favourite. But I don't know, perhaps I should give it a reappraisal one day. Let me know your thoughts on it if you've read it. I wasn't keen. Then I got the novel adaptation of Douglas Adams' Shada, which I still haven't read. The Dostrom's Curse, which is a fun 4th Doctor adventure on a golf course. The Silent Stars Go By, an 11th Doctor and Ice Warrior story. In the Blood by Jenny T. Colgan, which is a somewhat sequel to her 10th Doctor Big Finish story, Time Reaver. I think me and my sister have reviewed this together at some point too. If I have, and it's still up, I'll put a link. Then I have another Jenny T. Colgan book, Dark Horizons, with the 11th Doctor encountering Vikings. I also appear to have a paperback version of Coming of the Terror Files. Is it weird that I have 2 copies of my least liked Doctor Who book? Yes. Yes, it is. This does have a cool cutout cover though. Then I have the Decide Your Own Destiny book, Claws of the Macra. I did start reading this, I think, but I don't think I ever finished it. Then there is this 2-in-1 book. On one side is Heart of Stone, and on the other, Death Riders. Another one is The Good, the Bad and the Alien, which looks like it has a gangster meerkat with a Tommy gun on the front. I can't believe I never read this, because frankly, that image makes me want to read it right this second. Will it be as good as Badger Space Pirates? Only time will tell. And then on the other side has System Wipe. Some more comics in addition to those on the shelf downstairs I have the 10th Doctor collection of Doctor Who magazine comics, IDW Comics 10th Doctor and Master collection Through Time and Space. I was never really a massive fan of the IDW comics, especially the art styles. I generally prefer Titan Comics work with a license, but these are still worth checking out. I have a Doctor Who dot to dot book, of which I have completed a grand total of just 1 page, the 8th Doctor's face. And similarly, I haven't done much in my Doctor Who colouring book either. Some other random books I have, the Doctor Who Monster Miscellany and the Time Traveller's Almanac. Are you still with me? Amazing if you are, because this is a long video, but don't worry, we're almost at the end. Only Torchwood books to go. Starting with this comic, Rift War. I think it might be a collection of the comics from within the short-lived Torchwood magazine, but don't quote me on that. And then we've got the hardback books that came out along with the series. Much like the Doctor Who ones, they came out in batches of 3. The first 3 were Another Life, Border Princess, and Slow Decay. Unlike the Doctor Who ones, the spines of these aren't just individual spines. Each set of 3 formed a picture of the complete Torchwood team. The second set consisted of Something in the Water, Trace Memory, and Twilight Streets, which saw the return of villainous character Billis Manger. Now, like the TV show itself, these books are obviously more adult in terms of their content than Doctor Who. There is swearing and sexual content in these books, which is why I was surprised to find them on the children's section of a bookstore once. Clearly, the store just saw that they were a Doctor Who spin-off and didn't know anything else about them, and decided just that's where they belonged, without bothering to find out more. Oh dear. I just hope that no parents of 10-year-olds pick them up. Pack Animals, Skypoint and Almost Perfect make up the third set, and as you'll notice, the team is reduced on the bottom of the last of those, so this one takes place after the Series 2 finale and the death of Tosh and Owen. Then we have more with this reduced Torchwood team, Into the Silence, Day of the Dead and The House That Jack Built. And then the final set in this style consisted of Risk Assessment, The Undertaker's Gift and the short story collection, Consequences. Then, of course, Miracle Day happened, and we got 3 more books that are tied into that. But the hardback format was unfortunately lost, and we just got paperback ones for these. They were also set at various points in the Torchwood timeline, but all linked back into the plot of Miracle Day in some way. Long Time Dead, brought Susie back. Firstborn was a prequel catching up on Gwen and Reese's situation before Miracle Day, and The Men Who Sold the World is a prequel about the new Miracle Day character and CIA agent Rex. I really wish they'd bring Rex back into the Torture videos after Miracle Day. We were left with a bit of a cliffhanger. You know, he's also immortal. I need to find out what happened to him. And that is my Doctor Who book collection. If by some miracle you've made it to the end of this video, then maybe leave the phrase "buried under books" in the comments, just to let me know or something. I'm recording this voiceover a whole year to a year and a half after I recorded the footage, so I would say that I'll try and do a DVD collection next, but let's be honest, it'll probably take me a few years. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and all that jazz for more Doctor Who and other geeky pop culture content. Really helps me out. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.